All right, so today I'm just gonna wait a few minutes, let people catch up and all that stuff. And the alert go out, here he is, he's doing this stuff. So for your latecomers, you can just fast forward, I don't know, like 30 seconds. Okay, there goes the bing, now you're there already. All right, so today I put up a title that may sound a little bit controversial in that I say, why do dogs love us despite our cruelty? So the question is, okay, do dogs love us because of what we do for them, or do dogs love us because they just love us? Yesterday I talked about the aspects of making the incorrect assumption that there is a human forced domestication of dogs, when in actual fact it's not a forced domestication of dogs. It's that aspect of sharing emotional isomorphism and the construct of how we feel about each other, codependent behavior, how we feel about ourselves, egocentric behavior, relational to our dog and to ourselves, which will always be either a codependent or an interdependent relationship. The interdependent relationship is the one that, of course, our dogs are socializing with other dogs when it comes to, and I really apologize, I just realized I've left the laundry on. I've been up since like 5:30 a.m. So I wasn't thinking, and I just did all my dishes here. So it's going to beep off and everything like that. So one just, again, the interdependent relationships, the socialization that our dog has with other dogs, it's always very important, right? So you never want to have a situation where your dog has had a negative circumstance with another dog and then go, well, I'm just going to keep my dog away. So what I always do whenever my dogs witness a rather traumatic experience, for example, seeing another dog attack another, that kind of stuff, I will always reset my dog and give them a hug, because they will feel the trauma. So the same thing when we feel that, when we see two dogs attack, we're going to go, oh my gosh. Like, excuse me, I'm just going to stop that. I'm going to close the door on that. Okay, so it's that point of where our dog is going to feel threatened and worried and scared. They're witnessing violence. So how does your dog process violence? It's the same thing, how does a child process violence? What do? You take that child of yours, or a child that you've seen in victim services, etc., and then they sit with the child, or they stand, whichever what is appropriate, read body language, help that child process through what has happened. Let them understand, even if the child is unable to articulate, for example, due to physical disability or due to age, unable to articulate. What does a person do? They spend time, they console their dog. They console the person, same thing as you would do with your dog. So I always reset them, because it allows them to understand that their fear, because they're going to be exposed now. They're going, oh my gosh, what's going on? What's going on? My human is right beside me. What is going on? So I'll always reset them, I'll always sit with them, I always hang out with them, and let my dogs know that they're safe. I won't walk away, I won't do anything that's kind of strange or odd. I will call them over, and I'll either stand with them, depending on the environment, or also give them a little bit of a hug, a reset hug that allows them to feel safe again. I can feel the respiratory behavior, if they're breathing heavily or not. I can feel that. Once they're calmed down, then I'll let them go. And then they have that experience where they've dealt with this witnessing of another dog attacking. They go, okay, cool, right? And now they feel they've been walked through, they've been guided through that trauma, so that it allows them psychologically to process this very traumatic experience with a reference point. And that reference point is a codependent behavior, because we create that reference point by doing that reset, physical reset. Hi, David. Hi, silly boy. And by doing that reset with the dog, then we allow them to process and learn what that experience was like without having any trauma. Help talk them down, so to speak, without having to obviously make any conversation with them. So that's what I'll do if that ends up happening. But we have to look at the fact that the inherent structures of codependency, right, will align ourselves because we'll share similarities. The only reason why we have dogs as our best friend is because emotionally they satiate that little bit of us that needs that more basic type of emotions, that not as complex as it is with human sophistication, right? The complexities of premeditated thoughts and things that are all evil. Sometimes with our dogs, they're very basic in how they process emotions. So if we allow them to just have that time to go and feel their anxiety or their fear, self-defensive measures, if we're able to give them that time to just pull back and go, okay, you know what? All right. And it sounds really simplistic in that behavior, but again, you can see dogs learning how to self-regulate. You can see dogs who I write in my description here, experiencing jealousy. And a lot of dogs see, they're human with another dog petting. They're like, okay, that's cool, right? Because they're confident. They're self-confident. Their dog is looking at going, okay, well, all right, my human's playing with the other dog, but I get to go home, right? That kind of old adage. So then you see the dog that becomes jealous or somewhat complex or perplexed by what they're watching, and then that dog will then pull back a bit. That dog will go, okay, I don't know what's going on, and you'll see them standing off. You'll recognize your dog's behavior. They'll be standing off in the field. They won't move, or they'll just kind of slowly move as they're watching what's happening because they're trying to process, okay, is this a threat to me? They're experiencing these emotions they've never experienced before, and they're trying to figure out what is happening. So then, of course, they start walking around trying to figure out, okay, do I go? Do I not go? And when it comes to the dogs who are very dangerous, they'll immediately come over, obviously, and attack the dog that I'm with. If that is the case, then you've always, obviously, and there's an expression of jealousy which is very heightened on your dog. And it's a process that they're not able to deal with. So what happens then is they feel that the threat is not that the other dog is going to take the human away, but that your dog is going to lose their affection, their position, so to speak, in the family. They're going to lose that part of family because now there's another competition that jumps in. So your dog's going to go, oh my gosh, I don't know how to deal with this. How do I deal with it? Is by just expressing physical anger. So then to be able to keep two dogs that are separate. So when I get dogs in, right, and as you all know, that the dogs that I get in are extremely dangerous. They're 150 to 200 pounds. They have significant attack histories. They have done significant issues to people and all that. And at the same time, they come in here, they're unmuzzled. As soon as I can get them unmuzzled, they're being integrated socially within my group, and they're all other dogs who are previously dangerous dogs. So all that catalysts are all there. It's just that little trigger each time. Start one, and the whole domino effect happens with the other three. And so all four dogs can be into a fight where sometimes three dogs will be on top of one dog here. In pretty brutal circumstances, I had to break that up. So it's allowing them to understand that they're feeling safe. So even if your dog is way off there and they're watching you, and I have the dog here that I'm petting, and I will literally pet them the same way as I would pet my own dog. So I don't move my hand all over the place. I keep my hand still. I'll be very cautious of how I touch them, so that that way that my dog can see how I'm petting them. So then they go, okay, he's petting him the same way. So then my dog goes, okay, there's no difference in my behavior with the two dogs, so I don't feel threatened. Not jealous, but I don't feel threatened. And at the same time, I will keep conversation with my dog over there by calling their name. So I will say, and I'll make up the name. I'll say Zevia while I'm holding this dog here. So that way, when my dog is over there watching, going, okay, I don't know why my human is petting that dog. They hear their name, they go, okay. And because I've taught them and interacted with them contextually how I am speaking in a regular language, regular tone of voice. My fault there. I forgot to turn the thing off. So then I'll speak to them in a contextual tone of voice the same way as I talk to anybody else, so that when they hear me talk to this dog or to the human being and them, they're hearing the same tone of voice. They're hearing the calmness. And so that way, when they're starting to get a little bit of jealousy, I start, again, doing the same fundamentals of when I give them a hug and say their name and say, you're okay. They're hearing the same thing when they're out there. So they're learning to self-regulate. So they're learning how to self-regulate. And because the dog is learning how to self-regulate, then they go, okay, all right. They have a reference point from having heard their name before, having heard things that have been associated with being calm and being hugged, all the contextualizations, right? They have a core idea of emotions, that one tunnel, and what I'm doing is I'm helping to expand to it, right? Just adding on to some of their circumstantial experiences so that they learn how to self-regulate. It creates that thought. It's the same thing how we learn. So then I contextualize everything that happens with the dog. So again, when the dog is off there, I will say their name, so it reminds them that I am still conscious of them, that I have not divested my, my love and my dedication to another dog, but that indeed I'm equalizing. So it's not a part of being competitive in regards to sharing. It's in regards to letting our dog know, or your dog know, that you're still keeping them in sight. You have not lost attention to them. And often it will help a dog not feel so threatened because you're saying their name. You're acknowledging that you're still, in love with them. You're not dedicated to them, codependent with them. Whereas a dog down here is not an aspect of an influential permanence. Because again, if I'm just, and I don't go down and pet the dog and do all these kinds of things, because this is an affront to my dog as well. Because again, the dedication is there, it's been earned. For me to be able to pet any of my dogs here, or the rescues, means that I've gone through an extremely dangerous amount of time with them. So they know that I've earned it, I know I've earned it with them, and for me to have that same exuberance with their dog here would then be a betrayal of all the work that's earned and devalued. And so I don't talk in regards to that preponderance of conscious thought, but on the latency of that, where it exists, where that gossamer aspect of thought helps to kind of clean it up a bit as well at the same time. So again, creating context to everything. It's extremely conceptual, of course, but so is consciousness. And that's part where, by letting them know that they're still safe, letting them hear their name, helps them self-regulate because of all the other work that has happened. So it's not just like the traditional, oh, well, that's what he does. He says their name and the dog is trained. No, it's reminding them to think through what's happening by saying their name in the same way I would say it in a regular conversation. Then the dog goes, okay, now it makes sense. Because now my human is saying my name, and at the same time I've felt threatened other times, and I've heard my name said that way, and they've hugged me, they've reset me, right? And then that part starts to be comparative. Then your dog starts to compare things from other aspects of circumstances. Just like how we learn, how we put things together. When we're talking to somebody, we can start picking out what they're going to say because we start putting the pieces together. We do it in a sophisticated manner, and we articulate it verbally, whereas our dog doesn't have the experience to begin with and the ability to exhaust that type of psychological processing. So we find that way by helping them guide through, by reminding them of thinking, of processing what's going on. So, all these kinds of words and all that stuff help them. So that is going to also be a part when I say the human and dog emotive isomorphism is on that same structure, right? Isomorphism in regards to sharing biological structures, similarities, blah, blah, blah. Emotively, so it's kind of a liberal poetic take of this is emotive isomorphism, where we have cohabitated by coincidence, by deliberation, right? We've gone out and adopted a dog, etc. It's not that part of the human and civilization domesticating dogs as a species or a genus as a whole. That's incredibly conceited. What it is the fact that we've learned to share similarities in emotions. And because we see in dogs the more exuberant, overt expressions of codependency, then we go, okay, wow, this is very easy to interpret. Whereas, for example, a cat is quite, invertive in dependencies. We're not going to see that kind of emotion. So with a dog that has overt emotion, expressive, and as human beings we're generally quite closed off, quite introverted in our emotions, especially publicly, then we have that connection. So then it's like kind of a yin and yang part that we happen with the dog and the human. Yeah, emotive isomorphism. We share the ability to process commonalities of core emotions. The rest of that fine detail of higher aspects of emotional cogency has to then be taught in very little droplets to our dog, so then they have the ability to process what's going on. Because the dog's processing at a tenth of a second and faster, then we teach them how to articulate that as well as again as just giving them a reset. They give them a hug, give them a reset, then they feel okay. Then they're like, all right, cool. I can feel the respiratory aspects, the behavior, the physicality, where they're turning, if they're tense or not, the paw positions, all those things I show in the videos, predictive behavior. Like I said, he's going to move his right foot or his left foot, and it happens because you can feel the cogency structures in his body as David starts processing what he's thinking about. So that all happens as well when we're dealing with saying the dog's name, when we're dealing with them with emotive aspects of them and creating that relationship where I am saying their name in different contexts. So my tone is going to make shifts as well. So the dog learns to hear their name in different contexts, just like human beings. again, scaled down to the quantification of how a dog is processing their sentience. So then again, the dog is watching, going, okay, my gosh. But they have, again, at that scaled down perspective. We're at 100, and say, for example, our dog's around 63, 67% of sophistication and cogency. Then the dog is like, okay. So we look at that dilution. And as I say, it's like 1 can of frozen orange juice with 20 cans of water poured into it. Not the other way, not 20 cans of water with 1 can of orange juice, because you have to create from the structure of what the perspective is. If we have the can of orange juice, which is human, 100 out of 100, we pour in the water, then we have the dilution, and then we have a better relative scale versus the water and adding the concentrate onto it, right? So you understand that part of the psychology structure of development of sophistication. We come from the core of it, that it's pre-existing there, and then we build out onto that abstract of consciousness. So that's how the emotive isomorphism is going to happen, right? It's not a genus, it's a domestication, it's forced, it's contrived. Hello, Mr. David. Hi, silly boy. Hi, silly boy. Here's Mr. David. David. Hi, silly boy. So he's going to come out here. Here he is. He was on 80 milligrams of Prozac and 750 milligrams of trazodone daily for 2 years. Extremely dangerous dog. Couldn't be around people. Can't touch him. Blah 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 blah. All that kind of stuff, right? And there's no need for treats or medication. It's addressing psychological process at its core, which is exactly what you would do if a friend of yours was having a bad day. You'd be like, hey, let's sit down and talk, right? So it's the simplicity of what's going on, and that's the most important part. David, you're okay. So David wants to play around a bit, so he's backing up a bit. So as David backs up here, you can't see him. Hi, silly boy. I'll bring the screen down a bit here. So there you can see him there. So when he backs up and all stuff, I always remind him of the words because he's moving. So I will always use words, for example, the B8 back up, David. That's it. He's doing it on himself. So I'm using that as a passive aspect of training. So I call it passive training or in motion training. Well, not necessarily in motion training, but passive training, which is if the dog is already doing something, I just say the command, right? The direction. It's really quite simple. The similarity in the human analogy is if somebody's walking down there, you're giving them directions, you tell them to turn right, and they get down the thing, they look at you, you go like that. You make the motion, right? You follow through. You teach them that that's where you turn right. That same sophisticated behavior is diluted in application with the dog, but they're still doing it, and it's happening all the time. So I remind them of the words so that they hear it. It's no different from what we as human beings learn, but in a diluted perspective. Right? That's how we quantify sentience and behavior. It's quite simple. So that's the emotive aspect. And the other thing is, so I write down the rest of the part about it, about how dogs really dedicate to us, right? The reality is, so you've heard the old adage, and people try to attribute it to, Keanu Reeves and all these other people saying the dog, right? A dog is the only creature in the world that loves you more than they love themselves. And that is most audacious and hubris of any statement, right? It's an irregular, illogical statement. You cannot love anyone more than you love yourself. If you love someone more than you love yourself, then it's called an infatuation. And an infatuation is not based on logic, it's based on a dysfunction of emotions. Codependency is dysfunctional, like Glenn Close in Fatal Attraction. It happens that way. So then when it comes down to the part of truth of what the dog is doing, because they're willing to give their life to save ours, despite anything and everything we've ever done to them, that is true unconditional tenet of love. So the adage should be, the dog is the only creature on earth that loves you as much as they love themselves. That is equality. That's congruency. That is true love when the equality is there. So our expectation from our dog is to perform and be happy and be nice and all these kind of things and not be mean and dangerous. When it comes to the dog that is dysfunctional and dangerous, his only fear is whether or not the human being is going to hurt him again like every other human being has hurt him. So that cruelty means that our dog, all these dogs here who have, again, attacked people, tried to kill people, literally dragging them off couches to really inflict significant wounding, all these dogs did so because they felt threatened. That's right, but what kind of threat? And that dysfunctions and all that have to core down to the more definitives of what caused it. If we understand why a dog would pull somebody off a couch is because they were scared of who the person was themselves, not because they were on the couch, then we get to eliminate the incorrect assumption that the dog is being territorial. Now we understand that the dog is actually doing it because the dog when, oh my gosh, who the heck are you in my home? Get the heck out. Oh, no one's doing anything. They don't realize what a threat. Maybe they haven't seen the person. Maybe because they're still or they're moving. All these other factors and variables. I have to do something. Boom, boom, boom. And then the dangerous activity occurs where the person is almost killed. So then how do I take that dog here and help them by showing them that I'm not going to behave the same way as before. I'm not going to behave the same way as other animals and humans have behaved cruelly. And if there's an animal, another dog here that attacks them, I'll be immediately there to separate and to discipline whomever it is, or to separate them and just separate them. It's actually better to separate the two dogs and leave them like that and maintain the separation, because one dog will continue forward. If you maintain that presence where both dogs are corrected, then they go, oh, okay, we're being supervised, no one's getting in trouble, I don't have to be afraid as much now. But if we start correcting one person, one dog, then that other dog is going, okay, when am I going to get hit? Right? So that's what ends up happening if you create the disparity of familial construct, codependent behavior, equally taking care of both of them regardless of what happens, and showing them that there's an equal and fair aspect of punishment being meted out, in the sense that just stop doing it. So that way when you do get to a point where you go to 10 out of 10 on your scale of impatience and anger, that behavior then becomes a bit more profound, instead of your dog going, well, my human always gets angry anyways, so who cares? So that's kind of about it. I'm going to run out of time. I have to phone a friend of mine. I'm going to throw this in here too. So what else I'm doing now, which is great. I don't see anyone actually watching, so this is even better. So I just started getting into hockey cards, sports cards, and a friend of mine who's very good at picking out sports cards has been helping me. So I have some cards coming up, hopefully this week and next week, and you know, trickling in that I've been bidding on some really cool cards, and I'm hoping when these ones come in, it's going to be pretty substantial. And it's going to be pretty awesome. So I'm going to wait for that one, those ones to show up, and I'll probably unpack it, unveil it on YouTube, on my YouTube channel, under a different playlist instead of the dog one. So I'm doing that. So that's going to be kind of cool. So get those cards in, and then hopefully by next week as well, I'll be able to kind of make a different announcement on the other stuff I've been talking about, which is more of a business focus, and it's something that is hopefully going to be rather substantial, and everything will tie into what I'm talking about. So there's that. So whoever's hearing that, we'll have to figure that out some other time. So I talk about the jealousy that your dog exhibits, and the ability and inability to process emotions. So it becomes a little bit dry and boring on it, right? Just because it's like, I have to, right? You're kind of like, okay. But the complexity of processing behavior is phenomenal. It's unbelievably complex. So you cannot go and listen and settle down for the your dog is fearful, right? I talk about all these dogs share, and I've talked about it in the past. Their history is profoundly rich, albeit with cruelty or neglect, but it's profoundly rich. And from that we can determine behavior. And when we have context emotionally of the behavior, empathy, right? Empathetic behavior as opposed to antipathy or apathetic behavior, we go, okay, now we understand what our dog has come through. Then we have the ability to process, go, you know what, I understand why you hurt. Then we have more patience, because we're so spoiled by the instantaneous obsequious performative behavior from our dogs, that we go, hey, you know what, our dog is not healing fast enough. Like I say, when I work with people, I always say to them, I'm going to give you an overwhelming amount of information. I've worked with CEOs of multinationals, I've worked with well-known people in entertainment, blah, blah, blah. People extremely highly functional. And every single time I've said overwhelming amount of information. And I give it all to them in one session, because why would I hold their dog's psychological healing at hostage, right? Pay for the session and that's it, but they get everything. And they learn, because it's recorded and they can watch it anytime on their own, they learn the fundamental aspects of their dog's behavior. It gives them a reference point back to day one. Most people don't look at it at what they used to do, because they become self-conscious. Oh, I don't want to see what happened. I'm a little self-conscious. But you have to watch it so you learn from your own mistakes. That's what I do. I don't do with the videos because I couldn't hold a cell phone while trying to, give Walter or Tonka a treat, or David, all these things. There's lots of stuff that happens even now, still continuously, that's extremely dangerous. So I don't laugh and to mock it. I just think it's humorous to me because the behavior is so natural, right? Because the dogs are innately predators. They're born predators. So we are surprised when they start acting dangerous. That means that the dysfunction comes from the human side of how we domesticate dogs, so how they feel safe, right? That unconditional love that we give dogs. If we create that dysfunction where we say we cannot be trusted anymore, your dog goes, oh my gosh, my entire world, my entire belief of you has been destroyed and ruined now. And the worst part is your dog doesn't know how to articulate it. Because your dog doesn't know how to articulate it, then what happens? Your trust goes right down the toilet. Well, you're thinking, well, what's going on? And then you stop using your dog's name and all that stuff because you become emotionally disenfranchised. The cognitive dysfunction happens on your end as a deliberate aspect to self-protect. Then your dog feels that body behavior changing in you, and seeing the whole aspect of conduct has shifted, and timing and rhythm structures, all that stuff start becoming affected, that your dog recognizes because your dog is a born predator. They remember these things. The stuff that I do has been learned from tens and tens, over 27,000 hours working alone with dogs without using treats or medication. These dogs, as you see in the description, are just a couple of the ones that I've worked with. And I have always found that it's important that I do this so I can prove to the world that every single dog can be stabilized, downtrained, and not have to be killed. That's why the callousness of the profession calls behavioral euthanasia. They say put down, destroyed. It's not destroyed. Would they say that about a person in a car accident that was killed? The person was destroyed in the car accident. The empathy disappears when the lineal structure and the inability to process emotive relevance to loss of life fails, because it's such an academic structure. Your dog always wants to feel safe, no matter if you're petting another dog, no matter what happens, right? No matter what happens, your dog is always wanting to feel safe. And it's the same part, how do they feel safe unless we show them, prove to them that we are there to help them, to give them a hug, to do all these kinds of things that make them feel safe. Physical, how many times have you ever felt scared as a child and you ran to your parent to give you a hug, right? Your mom gives you that big hug, or your dad gives you that big hug, and you feel safe in the arms of protection. This is the same part that happens with your dog. So, as I say here, right, your dog's unable to express their emotional incongruencies, their anxiety, right? So then they have to find a way to exhaust it. And if they don't know how to exhaust it, they core down to their basic emotions, such as really core logical aspects of fear, right? Fear is that very core aspect that roots everything. From emotion is going to be from joy. Fear is going to be the subsequent cause of it. Joy is going to occur first, because without joy, you don't have the reference for fear. You can have fear. If you have fear only, you have no reference for joy, because then everything that happens as joy would be just a shade or a gradient of fear. You look at that structure, right? The consciousness structure. It's going to be fear as that root? Absolutely not. It's going to be joy of safety. That's why endothermic life created, because of the warmth, etc. Right? Endothermic life attracted to light and creating cell structures in that aspect, such as light sensitive eyes, right? So they're going to be that attraction of feeling safe. So we want to make sure that our dog understand that we're protecting them. And again, it's like if you're lost in a bad part of town and you're like panicking and it's getting dark and you're like, oh my gosh, I'm gonna get it, something bad's gonna happen to me. And so what ends up happening is you see a police officer, right? Safety. We've known and expect police officers to be our protector. So we see the police officer, we feel safe automatically, because we've known our entire life, we've grown up that police officers are there to protect us. So then your dog is looking at us like, okay, you're my parent. You're supposed to be there to protect me no matter what. So that's the same concept that we want to do, is let our dog understand that. Yeah, and the thing is that to try to say that that does not exist, where there's not that kind of love and all that stuff, is just like because the reality is we see the emotions being exhibited, complex emotions like jealousy, all these things. Sorry, I get so dry when I read off of this stuff, and that's why I try not to do it, because I become somewhat bland. I know it's kind of early in the day, nobody's watching this because of that, but I really don't care. I'm just putting this stuff out for everyone. What we need to understand is that there are feelings and there are structures of emotions, right? These templates that happen at breakneck speed, instinct speed, evolution speed, where all these little templates have been layered on like that snowflake, like that biological compartmentalization of the false positive that I speak frequently of. That happens boom, boom, boom in such a high frequency and a highly compacted structure written into that DNA, which means that the biological structure already must have the accommodation within the brain to create consciousness itself. So there has to be that somewhat pre-existing compartmentalization available for an abstract conflation of templates, etc. So, I got a little higher up on you guys there. But at the end of the day, by learning from what the circumstances are, it's allowing you to learn how behavior happens at the tiny slivers of behavior. When you start looking and seeing the tiniest slivers of behavior, then you start recognizing what's actually happening with your dog in real time. So all the stuff that I'm doing, I'm very fortunate to be somewhat quite high functioning, but all that has been learned over a lot of threat of life from other dogs here, and then it's been presented here in a very simplistic manner. So right now, Miki was trying to cry a little bit. So all this is presented in a really simplistic manner, so that there's human analogies so it makes sense. Well, okay, this is why my dog is like this, and that's why my dog is jealous. Just like I said throughout this whole thing, the jealousy cannot be exhausted. Your dog has to be able to process jealousy somehow. And if they don't know how to process, we teach them to calm down by giving them a hug, a reset. We feel the respiratory structure of the body as well as physical, the musculature structure of the body, everything. And then we go, oh, all right, cool. Now we can feel if our dog is tense or not. All these things, and as I explained in previous videos and future ones as well, it's how we can put that all together. And how I do it so that I'm actually able to give an extremely dangerous dog that has literally tried to kill a shelter worker a hug. How I can get them to a point where he is no longer trying to attack other people or dogs when he sees them. And when a dog does come running up, Walter will go to the back of the lead and wait for me to protect him. And this is done without treats or medication. This is done in real time. The same way how you would manage your child or your friend or a group of people in an office, right? It's a highly contextualized behaviors that you have to do. If you organize a birthday party, you've got to organize all the kids plus the adults and think, who do I talk to and who do I hang out with and where I have to position things and all that stuff. We simplify that and just look at the structure of how dogs are processing the rudimentary logic and emotions, really core type of behaviors. So that means then we can start to expand out and flesh out that ability for our dogs to understand. Like I talked about Minky and the structure being very core in a pipe of a hard cement pipe of very simplistic emotions, having to force him to experience other emotions and self-regulate at risk constantly of being attacked and bitten. But it allows Minky to learn how to trust and dependency from me, just like I did with all the other dogs. If they know they're safe, and if they know they're safe from being in trouble for behaving like they've been taught to behave, which is to self-defend, then they go, okay, now I can ease up a bit. Now I can depend on you. Now I know that you're not going to come after me when I'm threatened by something else. A few of my dogs have attacked each other, significant freaking wounding. And when Great Danes fight, they move furniture. Furniture's moving all over the place. Last place I used to live at, I had a baby grand piano there. That's about 700 pounds. They're bumping it right off the footings and moving it 2-3 feet to the side with just one bump. The fights are absolutely vicious because of the power. The power is beyond predatory, and as you those I've been literally attacked and picked up by Walter when he was talking. Forgiveness has to happen. All these things have to happen. All these behaviors have to happen where we go back to day one, square one, step one with our dogs, so that they learn again the basics, and then that trust is tenuous forever, gossamer thin, tenuous if we violate it. So we keep it that way, then our dog learns to trust us. We keep it the same all the time. They can then assume reliability on our behavior because we're not behaving the way everyone else is behaving. So that's why when Mickey goes to attack me and bite my hand, I keep it still. Sometimes I wear a sleeve or a jacket, but I usually leave it bare because I think of where he came from. So there's context of his behavior. I think of where he came from, being born and raised in a wire, like a chicken wire, like a mesh wire meat dog cage on a farm in South Korea. So then he's got the comprehension of seeing other dogs killed and boiled alive, literally. So his core behavior is going to be, every time someone touches me, they're going to do something. Like keeping my arms exposed is not anything other than the fact that there's nothing being hidden up my sleeve. There's nothing else for you to have to pay attention to because it's very clean and clear. If I had a sleeve that was moving around, obfuscating stuff, he doesn't know what's behind it. So then, because people may, on the farm, meat dog farms, as they're quite cruel, they may be wearing whatever. I don't know, making assumptions, hypotheticals. But if I put that into play of possibilities, then that means I'm much more enriched in how I can approach Minky with generosity and compassion and tolerance, so that when he does bite me, it goes, okay, cool, all right, you didn't do it on purpose, this is the reason why. And that's why a lot of people do that. If I keep my arm open and exposed, it allows Minky to see that there's really nothing there. And when if he draws blood, then he sees the blood and he goes, okay, and I don't do a big deal of it. There's really nothing. If a dog attacks you, there's really no use screaming or anything like that. Just concentrate and start trying to get the dog off of you. Right? You can go through the jaw and all these other aspects of behavior to get them to release. You cannot open up a Great Dane's mouth. It is literally impossible. You can pound as hard as you can and they won't release. It's extremely difficult. So that's understanding that how we are letting dogs know that they're safe is really super duper important, right? When we give them the reset, give them the context of understanding that they're safe, they can feel our breathing pattern, all that stuff, it allows them to feel safe. It's much more deeper than that in regards to the physiological structures, right? The nonverbal fluency, all these kind of translatable aspects of behavior that our dog learns when we give them a hug. I don't try to complicate it for people. With my clients, as I say, just give them a hug. And then over time, they're learning now. They're like, yeah, I can feel when my dog's tense. I'm like, yeah, right? And so what do? Well, I hold on to them, right? They're always like, am I doing the right thing? I'm like, what do you think? And they're like, right? And I go, yeah, that's right. Hold on to them. Your dog gets a little bit tense, get a little bit worried. Hold on to them a little bit longer if you can. The dogs I deal with will come back and attack me in the beginning. If your dog is safe, then go ahead and do it, right? Then you don't have to worry about it. Minky's a difficult dog for sure. Every time I put my head near him, I'm always waiting to get bitten in the face. It has the biggest thing is that our dogs need to feel safe. Really, that's it. So if you adopt a dog from a difficult area and all that stuff, it is true to give them time, so to speak, to acclimate, but it's also important for them to understand that your behavior is normal all the time. If you create a point where you're going to be kind of eggshells around your dog in the beginning, as you start to build up the relationship, then you create a dog that becomes distrustful of other people. Because your behavior starts to graduate for no reason. The familiarity creates a higher level of codependency. Because your dog's like, what the heck were you doing? And then okay, you're not as bad. Oh, I can trust you now. I see all your craziness and all that stuff, but it's disingenuous. And then they become unable to process outdoors, interdependent, as I said in the beginning, interdependent with other dogs and people, because they're kind of like, I'm always shy, I'm worried, I don't know what's going to go on outside. When your dog is dysfunctional like that, they go, right? Because they start relying on their human who has slowly proven all this love and everything like that. But if you actually have that point where you get your dog in, which is just like Minky, you watch the video in the link here, in 36 hours I've done what no one else has been able to do in LA in 4 months. and they called me out of everyone in North America first and foremost to help. And all this stuff is donated to all these rescues when I do rehab in-house. So, with Mickey, the same part is giving him that feeling. You can see in the first videos where he's trying to attack me through the crate, and then he's got stress defecation, he's covered in feces, he's shrieking out loud, shrieking on lead. All these really difficult things are happening for him. And my fear is always of being bitten in the face, and you can see through the progress of the video where he's this close to my face, literally. And he becomes somewhat capitulated in his environment. No, he becomes somewhat more trusting in his environment. And you start seeing his behavior going, okay, I'm going to expose myself, because he has that, not a regressive aspect, but he has that hope of my behavior will not be as cruel as the people before him. His storyline is very tragic. Unfortunately, that's a lot of dogs that I deal with. So if we let them understand that they're safe, that's the biggest thing. If your dog is scared or whatever, bring them to you. If they come back and forth on the lead and they come to you, bring them to you, because they're really wanting you to save them. They really want you to protect them. And some dogs will be a bit alert. Other dogs who are quite dysfunctional will be dangerous and try to bite you, your own dog, etc., because they're not familiar with your conduct or the body behavior from you, or their own body behavior and sensitivity. So then you have to essentially kind of like, but if you get careful, and every time your dog is feeling an expression or expressing to you that they're nervous or scared, bring them to you immediately. And do it in just a very casual, loving tone of voice, so they don't hear any heightened tone. It also helps to train you to calm yourself down consciously, so then you parlay into them a false sense of, what the fuck, right? Like that. Who cares? It's no big deal. Because you have to be a sharp tone of voice when you're saying it, but it still has to parlay where you're not really that concerned. That tone, that sharpness of tone, has to listen for something for your dog to hear, as well as the other dogs to hear on an auditory aspect, so you can bounce the sound off of any objects. So all these things have to play in. So that's why I core down to a different tone of voice when I talk to them if there's an issue that's happening and there's other dogs there. I say it sharp enough, I say it toned down, that it bounces everywhere. And then the dog hears and goes, oh, okay. So it shows that the human being's coming in and not a big thing happens. And what you'll see sometimes is the dogs start to kind of either ease in a bit more or ease out a bit. And that's when they're trying to look for a point to attack each other because they don't know what I'm going to do. Then I will make a different announcement, and I'll make a sharper tone of voice or lower it down depending on what the behavior of going on. It's just managing, right? You're talking to a friend on the phone or talking to your loved one, you get into an argument and she gets heightened up in her, or he, whatever, gets heightened up in their voice. You don't say, calm down, right? The last thing you tell them is calm down, like, right? But you change the tone in your approach so that you bring them down a bit. So that's what I'll do is when I shift tone with the dogs there, because 9 times out of 10, one of the dogs will get attacked, and my dogs will immediately will pull back once I get up, and they'll start to run away from the other dog and start trying to kill the other dog, because again, they know I'm there. They've learned to trust that I will be there to defend them, even with another dog, with risk to my own personal safety, but they don't see that. They just understand that I'm doing exactly what they would do, which would to give their life to defend ours. So I present the same thing. And because we're human, the other dogs generally in a dog park aren't going to be like, oh, I'm going to go after the human. They're like, oh, okay, all right, the human's pissed off now. So the psychology happens on different myriads of aspects. That's what I'm talking about. When I apply my work, it doesn't apply just on your dog. It applies on everything. The environment, it's multidimensional because I'm processing highly. So when we say these things, dogs go, oh, okay, humans coming in. And we have the sharpness of tone because we shifted it if that's a necessity, if we see movement back and forth that is somewhat either deliberate or disingenuous. Lincoln. So when Lincoln's making noise, we make an acknowledgement because that's an emotive structure on his part. He wanted to be acknowledged. So we do those points of behavior just like you would like a child going out loud suddenly. You're like, oh, they're trying to get my attention. So this is the same structure of behavior conscious-wise. If we look at the templates, dilutable scale, quantifiable, can of frozen orange juice, 20 cans of water. It's the same thing. Super simple. I hope I hope it makes sense to everybody. If you have any notes or questions, feel free to ask me. I hope I'm gonna get my cards and all that stuff. I got oh my gosh, I got like a Mariano Rivera card that I got for $1,200 US, and it's ready retailing for $3,000. So I'm looking forward to getting that in. I've got some other cards coming in. I'll do some open reviews on some really, really cool cards that I got. And I just got into it recently. And a friend of mine who's down in Florida helped me. He's really good at picking stuff, cards and all that. So off of eBay and everything. So it's going to be really kind of cool. And then I'm going to end up selling them on eBay and doing that. So it's kind of cool. Yeah, if you have any questions, whatever, feel free to email me. I can answer them live. For anybody else, Marge and all those people, I will answer your emails. Just taking the weekend off and just catching up today. But yeah, you have any questions, whatever. All this stuff is really quite simple for me to comprehend, and I can break it apart and destructure it for you, and you'll have an understanding. For anyone here, you'll have an understanding of what behavior is, because again, we infer from the history and from what we know, and we can create our own idea of what happens, and then we create that empathy, we create the understanding and comprehension of our dog's history. So we give life to our two-dimensional dog. We give life to them, and then we have context, and we look at the reality. Oh my gosh, they're expressing emotions and consciousness. Lincoln, hi Lincoln. So we express consciousness reciprocally, right? Reciprocate that aspect of behavior between each other. Okay, so I may come up and do another one tonight later on. I'm not sure, and then and then I'll do some tomorrow. Hopefully this is not too boring. It just seems to me that I'm kind of saying the same thing, but maybe it's because I know it. And when the weather's when the weather's better, I better drink more coffee. When the weather's better today or tomorrow, I'll take them outside. You see interactions going on and stuff like that. Provide information on behavior. When I'm providing information on the behavior, I'm only providing at that instant that I see it. And so by the time I'm starting to describe even the first letter out of my mouth, the first syllable, different behaviors have already occurred with the dogs already. So I'm always delayed when I'm trying to describe things. So I try to create predictive aspects of templates by watching the physical structure. You guys can learn to do the same thing. Literally the same way as finishing someone's sentence, knowing if someone's going to fall over while you watch them teeter-totter on high heels, right? That kind of stuff. We can learn these things in our dogs if we start paying attention. We know when our dog has to go pee. We can tell by their behavior. We extrapolate that to the rest of their life. Then we can start applying that to human behavior, which is what happens. All right, thanks a lot, and enjoy, and we'll see you guys.